Can you hear me? Stephen, can you hear me?
Yes, Rabbi, hello. Boy.
I don't hear you.
Can hear you. You hear me?
Hello, Stephen.
Hello there, Darren.
Hi, thanks. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, Diane.
Hello.
Hi, Dennis.
Inside.
Hello, Martin.
Hello all. You all keeping well?
Yes.
Getting used to the
Yes,
chilly evenings?
Yes. Getting very chilly, even during the day. Nice,
Yeah, I think we're in
nice
for a long,
autumn skies and things, but
chilly
winds. Chilly winds.
longer winter than normal.
Maybe. That's what's called global warming. Hello, Jeff.
Global chilling.
Yeah.
And with the ISCOM fiasco, it's a lot of fun.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, can hear you, Rabbi.
Okay, thank God.
Could hear you before.
The wire must have been loose, so I had to tighten it. Apologies. All right, let me get the screen share up. Sorry. Give me a moment. I had it all prepared. I don't know why it didn't. Okay, here we go. Right. Okay, ready to roll. Everybody on board?
Yep.
Okay, it's an interesting chapter today. I must say I enjoyed learning it earlier. And quite logical. Somebody's got some noise someplace. You can mute yourself, otherwise I may have to mute you. Nothing personal. Okay. So, hanitzoik einoi chibur, loy l'tumah v'loy l'tara. A column of liquid being poured is not considered as joined neither to an impure entity nor to one that is pure. What's going on? So you're pouring pure liquid into an impure container, or even onto the carcass of a crawling animal itself, which is obviously tomei and a source of tumah. So now the question is, when you're pouring the liquid onto this tomei object, the liquid joins what's being poured from to what's being poured to. So that column of liquid, if let's say it's a liter or more, while you're pouring, there's still some left in the container that you're pouring from, and it's going on to the tomei object. So that column of liquid is connecting that which is tomei to that which is not tomei. And the question is, will it join it and make a bridge to make the one tomei? Interesting question. So he says it depends. If one would collect some of the liquids that are being poured when they're in the air, what he collects is pure. Needless to say, the liquids in the container from which one is pouring remains pure. Okay, so generally speaking, it's not a problem. It does not connect to make the one side tomei. But there is an exception, as we'll get to. So when does this apply that it's tahor, that it will not be made tomei by the connection of the column of liquid? When you're pouring cold liquids onto other cold liquids, or hot liquids onto hot liquids, or hot liquids onto cold ones. So 3 out of the 4 times you haven't got a problem. However, if you're pouring pure cold liquids onto impure hot liquids, now we have a problem. What's the problem? The hot liquids it is joined. It'll be joined. Why? Because the liquids are considered as a primary derivative of impurity. They impart purity to the container in which they are held. Why do they say that? That if you pour cold onto hot liquids, it'll be joined, whereas in the other cases it's not joined? Here's the answer. Because the vapors of the hot liquids on the bottom that are tomei ascend, go up like a pillar of smoke, and become intermingled with the column of liquid being poured and the liquid in the upper container, causing it to become impure. For the vapor ascending from the hot liquid is also considered as liquid, meaning as an entity. It's not just wind. The vapor has in it a certain what should I say?
Like a physical quality.
Yeah. Because like it could make something
Liquid gas.
to make something wet, and so on. So it has some kind of material quality to it. So if you're pouring cold onto hot, so there's going to be a smoke, and that smoke, that vapor goes up and makes it tomei. So that's the only time it'll be tomei, where the column of liquid will join the two, if you're pouring cold liquid onto hot tomei liquid. All the other cases, it's not a problem. Similarly, we'll have another problem for this reason. When a woman whose hands were pure was stirring a hot pot that was impure, and while she's stirring, liquid collected on her hand from the vapor in the pot, which is tameh, her hands therefore become tameh. It's as if they touched the liquids in the pot. Similarly, if her hands were impure to start with, and she's stirring a hot pot, and liquid collected on her hand because of the vapor of the pot, all of the contents of the pot contract impurity as if she touched the liquids in the pot. So it works both ways. Either she could become tameh from the pot, or she could make the pot tameh. And by the way, this does not apply only to a woman. It applies to a man who might be the cook in the house as well. It's just using an example because most time the woman is the cook, but I know people where he does the cooking and she is making a living. Okay, 4. When honey from Zif or Tzapachat, those are two places in Israel which obviously were well known for being producers of honey. So when honey is poured, now honey has a unique sort of quality about it, right? Whenever you put honey in your tea, you have a problem to stop the flow, right? Because it keeps dripping and it keeps connecting. Like honey is unique in the way it keeps dripping and it's very hard to disengage the flow of honey to where it's being poured because of its thickness and its constitution. So the column of honey is considered as joined even if one is pouring from a cold container to a cold container. The reason being because honey remains attached to them and they're extended like glue. Yeah, it's like a glue substance, is honey. So it connects. Therefore, the column of all other foods which are poured are not considered as joined, even if they're thick, like cooked groats or melted fat or the like, because they still don't remain attached as much as honey. Honey is the exception. Similarly, with regard to other liquids, a column of poured liquid is not considered as joined unless one is pouring from cold to hot, as we explained. The exception being honey.
Rabbi, what are Zif and
Those are
Tzapachat?
those are places in Israel where the honey was made.
Ah, okay.
Similarly, a column of liquid is not considered as joined to a pure entity. Okay, so here, for example, you're pouring tameh water from a stone container, which does not attract tumah or the like, into a mikveh, which is obviously pure and a source of purity. So you're pouring tameh water into tahar mikveh water. We do not say that when the edge of the column being poured reaches the water, it is purified. Instead, it is considered as impure until it is all connected to the mikveh from one side, as we explained. Have you had this before? I'm not sure where he means as we explained, and I'm not sure what he means by from one side. Similarly, when there's an incline that has tangible moisture on it, the moisture is not considered as joined to other liquids on that incline, neither to make them pure or impure. Liquids that are collected on the ground, by contrast, are all considered as joined, whether this renders them impure or pure. So on an incline, it does not, but if it's flat on the ground, it will. Now, he gives an example of what he calls kitafres, which is an incline. Areva is a kneading trough. A kneading trough is on an incline, and there's tangible moisture on it. And there are 3 impure pieces of food. Together, these 3 equal in volume the size of an egg. Because in order for tumah to be to be transmitted. Impure food does not impart impurity to other substances unless it's the size of an egg. So these are three little pieces. Each one is less than an egg, but together, all three would combine to have the volume of an egg. Now the question is, will they become combined here in this situation? So there's a kneading trough on an incline that's got tangible moisture, and moisture renders something potentially to become impure. And there are three impure pieces of food, which together they equal, these three pieces equal the size of an egg. And they're positioned on the kneading trough, one below the other, and they are not combined. Because we need a way to combine these three pieces to get them to connect to each other to be that it should be the size of an egg. If there was standing liquid beneath the food, even if the pieces are all the size of mustard seeds, meaning tiny, the liquid will combine them all. So, if it's on an incline and there's tangible moisture and three tome pieces of food which together will equal an egg size, on the kneading trough, one below the other, they will not combine. But if there are only two pieces, they are combined. Why will two be combined and not three? So I have some notes here in my Chayenu. It says, if there's one drop of water between them, that drop of water is touching an egg-sized portion of impure food. So if there's two pieces of food together equaling an egg size, individually not, but there's water in between them, and this water in between them is touching both. So that water brings them together, joins the two, and you have the egg size. But if you have three pieces, then the water between the two is not going to help the third part. So therefore, it will not combine as it will when there's two pieces. And he says if there's liquid beneath the food, then it doesn't matter. Even if they're tiny like mustard seeds, the liquid will combine them all. Presumably together there is the egg size. Now the rest of the chapter deals with, not with a column of liquid or anything, but with the question of a person who is known as a Tvul Yom. You've certainly had this before, right? Who wants to volunteer? What is a Tvul Yom? Who remembers?
Someone is going to the mikveh, but it's not yet sunset.
And you can't. Correct. So there are certain instances when you go to the mikveh and presto, you are tahor. There are other instances when you go to the mikveh and you go to the mikveh by day, and you still have to wait until sunset or nightfall until your tahara, your purity, becomes complete. So you've gone to the mikveh, so you're somewhat purified, but not completely purified until that evening. So it's called Tvul Yom, one who toivled, he went to the mikveh Yom during the day, and he has to wait for the night. So we've already explained that a person who immersed to purify himself on the same day does not impart impurity to ordinary foods at all. So once he's gone to the mikveh, even though he's not completely purified yet until the night, if he then touches ordinary food, he will not render them tomei because his degree of tumah is very mild. However, he will disqualify foods that have much stricter tumah requirements. For example, truma, which is given to the Kohen and is sacred, may only be eaten by the Kohen, and therefore it's a higher degree of sanctity, and therefore even at full yom will render truma or truma liquids as tomei, he will make them shlishi, third level, tumah. Similarly, if he touches sacrificial foods or liquids, he disqualifies them, and they become revi, fourth degree derivatives. But ordinary food, his tumah is not strong enough to make tomeh. 8, there are certain situations where articles are not considered as joined when one of them is touched by a person who immersed that day, even though they are considered as joined with regard to all forms of all other forms of impurity, which are stronger than the Tvul Yoim who went to the mikveh and is just waiting for the evening. Instead, if a person who immersed that day touched them, he disqualifies only the article he touched, and they will not render anything else tomei. If instead of such a person, those articles have been touched by another impure person who is properly tomei, he hasn't gone to the mikveh that day, then those articles, then he would have disqualified all of them, because it's a stronger degree of tumah. If the person who touched them merely partook of impure foods or drank impure liquids, and thus his impurity is light, he disqualifies everything. In contrast, the person, the Tvul Yoim, does not disqualify it. Needless to say, if a person is a primary source of impurity, av hatumah, it's a serious degree of tumah, he will impart tumah to everything. That's sort of obvious. Why was the leniency granted to a person who immersed that day and is just waiting for the evening? Because he has already purified himself by going to the mikveh. He is lacking only nightfall to attain purity. So he's sort of almost there. He's tahor in a certain way, and it is he has done everything required of him. The requirement for his purification will come as a matter of time. He doesn't have to do anything more. He's done everything. Now he's just waiting a question of time. When night comes, he will be tahor. So it's a much lesser degree of tumah than other standard forms of tumah. A further leniency was granted with regard to a person who immersed that day. What is that? There are foods that are designated for human consumption and hence susceptible to all types of impurity, but they will still be pure if touched by a person who had already immersed in the mikveh that day and was just waiting for the evening. What are those foods? Barley and spelt when they are not shelled. If, however, they are shelled, and similarly wheat, even if it is not shelled, black cumin, sesame seeds are disqualified when touched by a person excuse me, who immersed that day. If they become tummy from a Tvul Yoim, then for sure, obviously, they will contract tumah from other sources of tumah who are more strictly tummy than the one who's already been to the mikveh. The final halacha, number 9, all of the handles of food that are considered as joined to the food with regard to a primary source of impurity are also considered as joined with regard to the Tvul Yoim. Have you learned about handles before?
Yeah.
You want to tell me what it is? You remember?
It's like the ends of branches that fruit is hanging from, or on a fruit itself, like a fig. The part that you hold it by is also a handle.
The stem.
Yeah, the stem.
So all of the handles of food that are considered as joined to the food with regard to a primary source of tumah, an avatumah, which is a very serious source of tumah, someone who touched a corpse, for example, are also considered as joined when it comes to a Tvul Yoim. So whenever food has been sliced, but is still somewhat connected, and thus is considered joined with regard to an avatuma, it will also be considered joined with regard to the Tvul Yoim. Whenever leniency is granted and objects are not considered as joined with regard to a person who immersed that day, they are considered as joined with regard to the impurity of hands. I think we learned that tumas yodayim, hands, is the hands are more easily susceptible to tumah. What's the reason? Who remembers the reason why our hands so susceptible to tumah? Because hands are busy. We're always busy moving our hands. That's why in COVID we had masks, because otherwise you have to sanitize, because your hands touch and you touch your face, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, whatever. Your hands are always busy. And therefore they get into trouble. This is also a stringency that applies with regard to the impurity of hands that does not apply with regard to the person immersed that day. So with hands we are more strict because we know that hands are always moving around and it's sort of impulsive. We would have to tie our hands up to stop it from moving and touching things. That's why they say, how do you get a Jew to keep quiet?
Tie
his hands, because how can a Jew talk without moving his hands? You know what I mean?
So my question, please.
Yeah.
Right earlier on, we talked about Dvash. Are we talking about date honey as it's normally applied, or are we talking about bee honey?
I don't think it makes a difference. If it's tameh, it's the idea, it's the constitution of the honey that is presenting this particular unique difficulty and connectedness between the two objects. So I don't think it makes a difference. If it's tameh, whether it's bees honey or date honey, if it's a tameh object, now that we still have the question, is it going to be connected because of the gluey stickiness of the honey?
Thanks.
Okay, quick quiz. In which of the following cases is the container that one is pouring from impure? Cold to cold, cold to hot, hot to hot.
Middle one.
Number two.
Done, well done. Quite right. Can a person with impure hands impart impurity to the hot content of a pot she is cooking with? We spoke about the woman who's cooking.
Yes, number three.
Number three.
Or number two.
Is it 2 or 3?
I think it's three.
What's the difference?
Well done.
I think it's two.
Yeah.
Well,
Three.
yeah, 3 was correct. Do the leniencies granted for objects that are touched by person who immersed that day, that they are not considered? The English there. Somebody, they need an editor here for the grammar. Do the leniencies granted for objects that are touched by a person who immersed that day, that they are not considered joined, also apply to the impurity of hands? Okay, so this was at the very end we had this. We said that hands are stricter, will be stricter with hands than we will be with the Tful Yom, remember?
Yeah,
So
so
leniency of the Tful Yom will not apply to the hands. What happens to the person who had immersed and is waiting for the day to end and he touched sacrificial foods? What does he make them? Tertiary, 3rd degree, 4th degree, or 2nd degree? What?
2.
Correct. Well done, guys. Thank you very much. Okay. So
thanks,
I
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Does everyone?
hope you have a good
Shavua Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Enjoy Lag BaOmer on Wednesday night and Thursday is Lag
Good talk.